In this video, we are going to have a look at diagnosing problems with Xdebug 3, after it has already been installed. The first thing to check is whether Xdebug has been loaded. On the command line you can do that with php-v. The output of this should show with Xdebug and its version number. If opcache is also present, it is important that it is shown above Xdebug. To check whether Xdebug has been loaded with PHP in your web server, you can create a small script in your document root with the following contents. When requested through your browser, this will show information about PHP. The output includes information about loaded Zend extensions, including Xdebug, right next to the Zend engine logo in the first section of the output. Further down the page there is also an Xdebug section containing primary information about Xdebug, its modes, and also its configuration setting values. Xdebug 3 includes a new function, Xdebug_info. Unlike PHP info, it is only focused on Xdebug and provides a wealth of extra information. It shows which modes are enabled and from which source. The source can be either PHP INI or the Xdebug_mode environment variable, as I have explained in the modes video. Each of the features also has a link to the documentation of that specific feature. Xdebug 3 has an internal logging mechanism that directs log messages to different outputs. One of these outputs is the diagnostics log, which is part of Xdebug_info output. Critical errors, and warnings that are generated by Xdebug are displayed here. Each entry also has a link to the Xdebug documentation, which explains what the warning or error is about and how they can potentially be solved. In this example we can see that Xdebug tried to connect to :1:9003 as part of the Discover Client Host feature. It could not connect as nothing was listening on that host and port. Xdebug then tried to connect to dev machine on port 9003, but that also resulted in failure. Below the diagnostics log are sections to indicate whether a specific feature was activated. This includes whether Xdebug's profiler was active and which profiling file was written to, and whether Xdebug's tracer was active and which file that used. Below the diagnostics information we find a subset of PHP's PHP info information. It includes PHP's version, whether PHP was built with debug symbols, and whether thread safety is enabled for this specific PHP build. This information is useful when finding a bug report at https://bugs.xdebug.org, in case there is something wrong with Xdebug itself. This section also includes which configuration files PHP used for this request, which is useful if you need to find out in which file to make changes to Xdebug's settings. The last section of Xdebug_info output includes all of Xdebug's configuration settings, including the values, and a link to the documentation. The diagnostic log that is part of Xdebug_info's output is not the only place where Xdebug 3 sends log messaging to. Every critical message and error message will always be sent to PHP's error log. Messages that are sent there can end up as standard error output when using PHP's command line interface or PHP's error log, which you can configure with PHP's error_log setting. Critical messages include things such as setting invalid Xdebug modes or when Xdebug cannot create its own log file. Error messages include things such as not being able to connect to an IDE when a debugger has been triggered. The third and final place where Xdebug can send log messages to is its own Xdebug log. In order to instruct Xdebug to create a log file, you need to set the xdebug.log PHP INI setting to a file. I would recommend setting it to c:/windows/temp/xdebug.log on Windows and \temp\xdebug.log on Linux and Mac OS. Some Linux distributions use systemd's private temp directories, especially when running PHP with Apache or PHP FPM. If enabled, the physical temp directory is different from the one that you configured. By default, Xdebug's log will include all messages that it generates, except for debug style messages. The different severities are critical errors, such as issues with Xdebug configuration, errors, such as not being able to connect to an IDE, warnings, which include failed debug connection attempts, communication information, which includes the full communication between an IDE and Xdebug during a debugging session, informational notes, which includes which headers Xdebug is using to determine which host to connect to, and finally debug messages, which are primarily useful for debugging Xdebug itself. You can configure which severities to be included in the log with the xdebug.log_level setting, with the default being informational and higher. Xdebug 3 includes a whole new suite of functionality to help you understand what is going on, allowing you to diagnose why things are not necessarily working. Future versions of Xdebug will likely include even more information.